The Cardinals kept their winning ways on Monday despite what I consider to be the worst instance of replay review gone wrong in MLB history. Am I overreacting? We'll talk about it coming up on b-schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. Early Tuesday morning, May 6, 2025. Allergies and all, we roll on with the show as the Cardinals get a 6-3 win over the Pirates in Game 1 of their series at Busch Stadium on Monday night. And I had considered this to be a must-win game. Cardinals facing Mlodzinski, the pitcher for Pittsburgh that came in with a 6.5 ERA. They had Miles Mikolas on the hill, who had been pitching better recently. We saw the bats for the Cardinals really come to life on Sunday in that doubleheader against the Mets. Really felt like this was a game the Cardinals needed to get. And despite Mikolas maybe not having his best outing, still gave the Cardinals a chance, 5 innings, 3 runs allowed. And the bats did find the times to come to life with a couple of crooked numbers. They score a couple of runs in the third inning. We'll talk about Jose Barrero's big night. He homered in that frame, as did Alec Burleson. That is a facet of this team that they could certainly use more of going forward. He's homered in consecutive days. And then the sixth inning, the Cardinals tack on 4 more runs. What should have been more than that, as we'll talk about, I think this is the worst replay review in MLB history. Am I being hyperbolic? Maybe not. I mean, if you saw this play last night, you know where I'm coming from. I have no earthly idea how replay review did not overturn the call on the field of Victor Scott II being ruled out. I have no clue what they were looking at. But it happened. He was ruled out on the field. He was ruled out in the end, and that meant the Cardinals had to stick with some of their late inning relief crew to find a way through the rest of this game, which did include Kyle Everyday, because, it's part of the job description, of course. Phil Maton and Ryan Helsley get 7, 8, 9. Gordon Graceffo ends up the winning pitcher in this game as he was recalled by the Cardinals on Monday. We kind of expected that to be the case for Michael McGreevy. I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday morning on the podcast. If not, that was maybe a topic we got deeper into on one of the Sports Hub shows. But nevertheless, it is Graceffo for McGreevy. I wouldn't overreact or panic with that McGreevy move. Like we said, it was anticipated. He had thrown 5 2/3 innings on Sunday. He wouldn't be available to the Cardinals for a handful of days anyway as a result of that. And I do think you're going to see McGreevy sooner rather than later. I don't know when it's going to be. It's not going to necessarily be 5 days from now because there would be an injury that would be needed to get him back on the roster sooner than 15 days. But it was kind of a spot opportunity for him. He did so well, though, that I would say it would be hard to imagine the Cardinals aren't keeping him on the radar for some future opportunities. But Graceffo is here, and he's another guy that did very well. And you've seen how that has sort of parlayed now into this next opportunity for him. He was pitching in a similar role as what we saw from McGreevy on Sunday. This was Graceffo a week ago in that Wednesday doubleheader against Cincinnati. And then because he was the 26th man on that day, Cardinals were able to recall him a little bit sooner. And he's going to be in a relief role, and he's going to have an opportunity, I think, he could go long relief, but he can also go like he did yesterday, participate as one of those bridge relievers to get you to the back end of a game. And when he came in, the Cardinals were trailing 3-2. And Oliver Marmol Sunday morning kind of talked about this, where that's always an interesting spot because the Cardinal bullpen, like the perception from the public has been, the bullpen has struggled. And there are guys who have at times certainly not been at their best, but it also does take a full group of 8, or in the case of the Cardinals having a 6-man rotation, 7 relievers to get you through games and to get you where you want to go as a team. Because you're going to experience a variety of games. Sometimes you're going to be up 6-1, and you've got relievers that you trust to use in those spots, hopefully to keep it 6-1. But if they don't, you cross that bridge when you get to it because you have a little bit more margin for error in those spots. But you need those guys in your bullpen, which is generally going to be I call it like your B squad, right? Your secondary unit. You need those guys to be able to do their jobs and get outs, because if they don't, suddenly instead of a 6-1 game in the 8th and ninth, it's a 6-5 game in the 8th and ninth, and here comes Maton, here comes Helsley. Like, those days, you didn't need to really use your top relievers until the other guys bungled it. So you need the other guys not to bungle it, right? Because then you save your top relievers, and they're available for the games like yesterday that end up being 6-3, and that was a legitimate way for that game to be, other than the umpire call. We'll talk more about the Victor Scott II play. But then in those games, like, yeah, you're going to need your guys. But before it got to 7, 8, 9, and your Leahy, Maton, Helsley contingent yesterday, you've got to choose some other guys. Mikolas goes 5 innings. Who's the guys that are going to pitch you that 6th inning when you're down a run and get the job done, but you're not necessarily wasting bullets of your guys that are the trusted back-end relievers? You can't bring those guys into those spots. You have to have other guys for those opportunities. Gordon Graceffo, long story short, it can work his way into being one of those guys. Did the job yesterday, happened to be out there the inning the Cardinals scored all their runs, and so he ends up with his second win of the season. He's 2-0 on the year despite a 7.0 ERA, and that ERA basically happened because of the blow-up in Boston. He's been very good otherwise. So it's just one of those things where the Cardinals need guys in those roles. Leahy has sort of elevated from that role to a late-inning option, and maybe the best late-inning option that Oliver Marmol has in the 7th and 8th innings, or in the 6th if it's a fireman opportunity because there's guys on base and he's your best reliever. Like, there needs to be some backfilling done for the replacing of Leahy, because you don't want to bring Leahy into that 6th inning at this point. If you don't have to, you're going to need him for the latter innings, hopefully when you have a lead. Sometimes, here's an example of probably what would have happened last night if the Cardinals don't score a 4 spot in the 6th. You might have seen more Graceffo. Graceffo might have pitched the 7th inning as well, maybe even the 8th. I don't know. We saw Sunday when the Cardinals absolutely had to with Michael McGreevy. Oliver Marmol was more than willing to let him go the distance, but that was, again, in the instance of a doubleheader, and so, tough times make for tough decisions, and he made that decision, and it worked out brilliantly, obviously, to just stick with McGreevy because it's kind of all you had, and you didn't want to burn up your bullpen knowing that was the second game of the day. There are guys that just were simply unavailable, and you have 3 more games this week before an off day on Thursday. So Graceffo, if the score was still 3-2 last night and you're on the downside, he might have just kept pitching, because you have to be careful not to chase a game. But with the guys with whom you're not chasing a game, you're not basically admitting, oh, well, those guys stink. You have to have other relievers, right, than your main guys. And so I think that's the crux for every manager, is walking that line between chasing games and understanding that eventually, if you start chasing every game, you'll look in the days where you have an honest-to-goodness 2-1 lead in the 7th, and you need your normal 7, 8, 9 guys. You might risk them not being available if you try to chase too many games. So that's why it's so important to have bullpen depth and have that group of guys behind your A squad to be able to do what a Graceffo did yesterday. Pitch until the game changes, until the game turns, and then suddenly those guys in the A squad can be ready at a moment's notice, because now it's a game worth saving, right? Sometimes you'll bring in your B squad, and it'll be a game where you're down 3-2, and then the B reliever gives up 3 runs, like we had seen, at different times, whether it's Matt Swanson or Munoz or different guys, Roycroft previously, and then suddenly it's 6-2, and you're like, well, doesn't really matter now. And that's a bummer of a feeling. It's a bummer of a feeling for Cardinals fans, and it's a bummer of a feeling for Ollie Marmol when it happens. But he doesn't usually have alternate choices or choices that are any better, right? He's got alternate choices, but that's the whole point about needing a 7, 8-man bullpen. And now it's going to be 8. We can stop talking about 7 because the 6-man rotation thing is over. That's why you got to have those guys past your top 3 or 4 arms be able to do what Gordon Graceffo did last night. It's kind of an unsung hero role in the game, even though it wasn't unsung because he was awarded the W as the winning pitcher. But wanted to make sure we talked about that a little bit, because it's a role that I think Graceffo could thrive in. He could be sort of the next Leahy in that regard, where they're both guys who have deeper repertoires, and they have pitched as starters or have the design to do so. And for right now, I think you can use them in a variety of roles in your bullpen, and that also, when it's that 5th, 6th inning spot to try to get you to the bridge, to bridge the gap, it's nice to have guys who can throw multiple pitches because you might face a lefty, you might face a righty. You don't really get to pick. It's more about the situation than it is setting up with the handedness, because you're oftentimes going to be maybe down a run or two, and it's about finding a way to save those games when it doesn't really feel like you're going to win them. And that's what the Cardinals were able to do last night, because they were able to have a huge sixth inning, a couple of home runs helping to pace things. In fact, in the sixth inning, as Willson Contreras, mama, there goes that man, he homers. And then you get more contributions from Jose Barrero, who, by the way, was in the lineup with Mason Wynn dealing with a sprained ankle. His belief is that he'd be back in the lineup on Tuesday. I believe he even mentioned he could play defensively if needed. I think the Cardinals were certainly trying to avoid that on Monday. So Barrero gets the start at shortstop and obviously shows a bit of what he can do. I mentioned the home run he hit in the third inning. And then he had the big swing in this game, a ground rule double, which was another well-struck ball, scores a couple of runs to make it 6-3 Cardinals, ends up with some real insurance. I guess the big swing was probably Contreras, right? His was a 2-run homer, making it 4-3 Cardinals instead of 3-2 Pirates. But that was some much-needed insurance by Barrero, and Victor Scott would have scored had it not been a ground rule double if the ball hadn't hopped the wall, because he's just so fast. I'm sure he would have made it home. And then he did score on the next play, but it wasn't ruled as such. Ruled out at the plate on a fly ball to center field. O'Neal Cruz did make a heck of a throw on the Lars Nootbaar fly out, and it was shallow center field, no doubt about it. But it's Victor Scott. Like, you're going to take your shot with him. The throw beats him there, which, again, credit to O'Neal Cruz. Former shortstop has certainly got a really good arm, as we know, and makes a great throw. It's a dart to Joey Bart. I kind of rhymed that on accident. But here's what happened then. Bart took a little millisecond to really get the ball in his mitt. He felt like he kind of had to almost ride it up his chest a little bit just to angle it and make sure he was able to corral the ball. He wasn't sure he had it at first. So I think that delayed the tag just a little bit. But it is clear as day on replay when you slow it down, and even when you don't, that Victor Scott II was safe on this play. There is no question about it. And I know there was some confusion from Cardinals fans with the way the umpire described it. And there will be comments about this probably for folks that maybe didn't listen 12 minutes into the podcast to hear me talk about it. But I want to be clear with this. And Ollie Marmol was asked after the game about it. According to folks that were listening on our Sports Hub show last night. Now, I wasn't watching the postgame because I was doing our own postgame on Sports Hub STL, which happens every night after Cardinals games. But somebody had mentioned that Marmol was asked about it and basically said he didn't have anything further, and our commenter suggested he kind of gave a smile that maybe showed he thought there was maybe more that he'd like to say, but he was going to decline to do so, which would tell me he knows what we know, that the call was completely bogus. But there were people who thought that Ollie challenged the wrong thing. I don't really know. I guess I understand why this became a topic of conversation, because the umpire did describe it very bizarrely in the way that he broke it down after revealing the result on the field. Call stands, but he talks about that there was no blocking the plate. Replay determined the catcher did not block the plate. And then he just says the call stands. And the way that he said it, I think people thought that Ollie only challenged the blocking aspect of it. I'm going to play for you what the umpire sounded like, just so everybody knows the context of why I think this became a conversation.
After review, there was no violation for blocking on the play. The call on the field stands. The runner is out. St. Louis loses their challenge for the remainder of the game.
So you heard there was no violation for blocking on the play. The call stands. Because he didn't say, and separately from that, the call stands. Everybody thought the only thing the Cardinals challenged was whether or not there was blocking, which is, of course, not the case. I know that might be, everybody wants to kind of jump on and pile on and think that Ollie does something wrong every time it's questionable. This was not even questionable. I will admit that at first I was thinking, well, there's no other way that they got the play wrong, so maybe this is what happened. But when you sit back and think about it, what does an umpire do when they come out to tell the crowd in the TV broadcast what happened on a replay? They're going to say one of three terms. They're going to say the call stands, which is what they say when they couldn't really tell on replay enough to overturn it, but they also don't know for sure that it was right on the field. But they'll say the call stands, which means what it means. The call stands. They'll say the call is confirmed, which means the call on the field was right and we can prove it, like we know for sure that it was correct. So we'll say the call is confirmed, or we'll say the call has been overturned. Those are the three things that they can say. They don't tell you an explanation, though, more often than not. You don't really get a lot more information about that. The reason you did this time was because there was an additional element on the play that was being challenged. Not because it was the only thing that was being challenged, but because there was another thing, which was, hey, was the catcher blocking the play? You got to look at that too. So they look at that. They at first, there was no blocking of the plate, so that's not part of it. Now, next sentence, we're going to talk about whether or not the call stands or is, and like, they say the call stands. I could be wrong about this. The umpires could have botched it in a way that I am not perceiving. I'm just speculating. This would have been a great one to have a pool reporter get to ask the umpires about it, but I don't know if that happened. I went to bed after the Sports Hub show, so I have no idea. It's one of those deals where, could the umpires have messed it up? The Cardinals obviously challenged every part of the play, but the umpires like inadvertently forget that? I don't know if that's possible. I'm going to say that it's not. I'm going to say that that's not possible. Where, like, in that instance, it would be, hey, we're challenging all these things. Was the catcher blocking the plate, and also did he tag him, or was the runner safe? Like the obvious thing that you're challenging. And they spend so much time going, all right, is he blocking? Is he blocking? And then they go, all right, he wasn't blocking the plate. Go announce it. Like, could they have messed up in that way? I guess. It seems unlikely. Umpires are often very bad, but I don't think they're that bad. I don't think they're bad enough to do that. So that leads me to believe what happened here is they could not confirm that Victor Scott II touched the plate. That's what they're saying. They could not confirm that his hand actually physically came into contact with the white of home plate before he was tagged, or at all, because clearly his hand, his wrist, his elbow is all over home plate. Like it's hovering above it if it's not touching it. And their thought would maybe be that they couldn't see that he was touching it definitively because of all the dirt that he sweeps up with his hand when he's coming into home plate, which, again, to me would be a ridiculous argument, because if he's sweeping up a bunch of dirt, why is that? Because dirt is connected to the earth. What else is connected to the earth? And actually raised up a teeny tiny bit, the plate. So there's no way for him to be sweeping dirt unless they're saying like, oh, he came in with his hand and he got the dirt and then it popped up and happened that his fingertips, his palm, his wrist, his elbow, none of those things touched home plate as he grazed across it, as his whole appendage swept across the plate. There is no other way for me to explain how the umpires and the replay review got this wrong. It's one thing for the guy on the field to get it wrong, which he wasn't in a great position either to be able to see that. I'm not sure what the perfect position would be on that, but it's a play at the plate where basically he's standing directly behind the catcher, right? He's to the wrong side of the catcher. So I guess the perfect spot to be would be between the catcher and the runner to be able to see that intermediary between the two. Granted, I think the best angle that we got was on the field of play, so the umpire wouldn't have been there. So I'm not going to knock him too much. It can be difficult to know. You're supposed to look where the catcher's setting up to be able to probably have a good idea of where the play is going to come. And then you see the throw, and you can kind of pivot to be in a good viewing area for the tag. But it doesn't matter. The guy on the field isn't the final say-so. He doesn't have to get the call right for MLB to get the call right. That's why they have replay review. To have that angle showing from basically center field down on the play on home plate, where he clearly is kind of corralling the baseball still. Victor slides his hand under. Do you physically see the hand of his white on, or I should say his hand on the white of the plate? Perhaps they're like Again, this would be such a stupid literal interpretation of this rule that you have to be able to definitively overturn a call. Of course his hand is on the plate, but it's a baseball field. There's dirt. Like, that's part of it. The dirt stops and the plate begins. You can pause right before he sweeps up a cloud of dirt to see where home plate is. You can draw your little line in your head, and then you go, hey, when his hand gets to that part, guess what? There might be some dirt, but there's also Victor Scott's hand on home plate. It's the only place for his hand to be. And then if you'd say, well, I just don't know if his fingertips really touch it. How about the part where his hand is all the way under Joey Bart's knee because he's touching the plate with everything from his fingertips to his elbow? His knee's on the plate, and Victor's hand is basically, I mean, there is no physical way he wasn't touching the plate. There's no reason to have replay review if not to fix a call like this. It is the worst that I have ever seen in terms of a replay miss. Let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree, if you understand why what I'm getting at with the Ollie Marmol part of it. They challenge the right thing, guys. Don't find a conspiracy where there isn't one. I understand, like I said, why people maybe thought that, because the umpire just was a little clunky in the way he explained. He didn't say there was no blocking on the plate, and also we found that the tag did not occur, or the tag occurred before the runner touched the plate, therefore the call stands. Like, he just said, no blocking, call stands. It made it sound like it was causation. Like, because there was no blocking on the plate, we found that the call stands. That's not what it was. What it was is umpires are too dense to know that the dirt is connected to the plate. And so when Victor touches one, he touches the other with every part of his left arm before he was tagged by Joey Bart. I think that's why they got the play wrong. There's no way that the reason they got the play wrong is because they didn't challenge both. And as John Denton pointed out, if you look at the MLB like game log, box score summary on their website that goes play-by-play, it even mentions both aspects of the challenge. It reads, Cardinals challenged tag play, call in the field was upheld. Cardinals challenged home plate collision, call in the field was upheld. It says it both. And so that's as definitive as it gets from the MLB source. So unless that's wrong, which it's not, their umpires were wrong. But like the ruling of how it went down, it was just because the umpire sounded a little clunky. I think MLB umpires are worse than any other group of officials in sports that has to explain calls on a microphone. I think MLB guys are worse at it than any other sport. Like NFL refs have done it for a long time. College football refs, it's part of the game. Even hockey, they do a pretty good job of telling you what happened and, giving you the lowdown, especially after a overturned call. And I think about other sports. NBA refs do they like get into the nitty-gritty of explaining things a lot of times. MLB umps, it's like they're bothered to have to do it, so they just give you the boilerplate, the least amount of words necessary, and then they're on with it. And I feel like that is what happened here. Like, he could have said, and the call stands. Like, he could have taken a beat and said, hey, this part about the blocking of the plate is not the only reason the call stands. It's half the reason. But we also found that, replay could not confirm that the runner got the hand in before the tag. They don't say that because they don't want to give you more information than necessary, because when the call is wrong, like in this case, people will immediately go, how can he say that they didn't see the hand in before the tag? Right? They just say the call stands and then they move on because it's easier. So I think that's the breakdown of what happened. Let me know if you disagree. I am pretty definitive. No, you're not pinning this on Ollie Marmol. And look, if it comes out that I was wrong about this, I will say, everybody who I was telling to stop making these claims, you were right and I was wrong. But that's not what's going to happen. So trust me on this one. The umpires are just bad. And I think it was the dirt explanation where we couldn't really see his hand because of all that dirt. Like, you got to be kidding me. But I think that's probably what it was, without seeing a pool report or anything like that. And frankly, when the Cardinals don't lose that game, the bothering the umpires about the pool report becomes a little bit less important. Although I do think I still would have really liked an explanation from from straight New York. Like, I want to know how they found that and didn't figure out how to overturn that call. But didn't end up mattering for the Cardinals. It almost kind of did. The ninth inning was a little more adventurous than you want to see from Ryan Helsley. And there was a batted ball by Brian Reynolds that would have tied the game if it had been a fair ball. It was maybe not quite home run distance, though, but it looked off the bat like, the camera starts to pan out and you're thinking, oh, crap. But it was foul, and then he was able to get out of the jam with a 102-mile-per-hour fastball right down central pretty much. Clearly caught Brian Reynolds looking for something else. And that was good to see because a lot of times when Helsley has struggled at times going back to last year, it's when he hasn't had the trust in the fastball and to use it whenever and to use it effectively and to pinpoint it. And so what does he do? He starts to cater more to the slider. And then sometimes hitters can either sit on that or, if it's not a sharp slider, it backs up. We've seen home runs or hard contact on those kind of pitches. So to be in that spot where a hitter as the league might start to be thinking, hey, is Helsley kind of falling into those patterns again when he struggles and not trusting his fastball? To trust and unload at 102, that was a huge spot. And he was able to come through and get the Cardinals the win in what I consider to be a must-win spot. Because you come off the series win over the Mets, you're facing a lesser team in the Pirates at home. You've been good at home. You lost to the Pirates at their place the last time you played them early in the season. You got to get the guy that is Majinski, and he's not a top-flight starter. Get game one out of the way. Cardinals did that. Now it really gets interesting. Game two, Paul Skeens versus Matthew Liberatore on Tuesday night. I plan to be down there at the ballpark for this one. And Paul Skeens got his version of roughed up against the Cubs last time out. I think he gave up 3 runs in 5 innings, but just was not as sharp as, we are used to seeing him. And the Cardinals got to him last time, too. So he should be a motivated guy coming into Busch. 2.74 ERA on the season. Liberatore's got a 3.44. Cardinal bats just got to keep it going. They got to back Libby in this one. Libby's coming off of an outing in which he didn't get to go the distance of his normal 6 innings that he had been pitching all year because of rain. And so he leaves that game after 3 innings, had given up a 2-run homer, so probably a sour taste in his mouth. He needs to be able to mow down some Pittsburgh hitters, get through 6, and keep the Cardinals in this one. If they can find a way to do it, they'll be up to 18-19 with a chance to improve to 500 with a potential sweep on Wednesday. Like, that's how close they are to turning this thing around and being back in the mix, at least in the conversation, right? I'm not saying that this would suddenly mean the Cardinals are contending for first place, but get to 500 and go from there, I think, has to be the starting point, and we'll see if the Cardinals can do that over the next 2 days, but the big one comes first. Paul Skeens, Matthew Liberatore Tuesday night. We'll see what they do at Busch Stadium and be back here to talk about it on the next episode, whether it's late night tonight, early morning. I'm going to continue to do these episodes, but right now we're going through illness through my house, and we just have to try to keep healthy and make sure we're getting rest too. So appreciate you guys for bearing with me. I'll get this up as soon as I can, and we'll talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.